Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kasia Meja and I am the Sales and Project Manager at Colombia Inc. For those of you who don't know us, Colombia Group is one of the world's largest trade show organizing companies with headquarters in Cologne, Germany, and broad network of subsidiaries, including our North American subsidiary, which is based in Chicago, and our Colombian subsidiary, which is based in Bogota. The mission of our subsidiaries is to create awareness about interzum Bogota and all other fair COMESA organizers around the world across multiple industries outside of the furniture and design segment, whether they take place in Germany, Cologne, or other countries. Today, we are going to take you on a virtual tour to Colombia, where our interzum Bogota show takes place. interzum Bogota, formerly known as Feria Mueble Madera, is the leading trade fair for industrial wood processing and furniture manufacturing in Colombia, the Andean region, and Central America. Next slide, please. This is where you can actually see all of us who will be presenting today, including me. My colleague Lena Pletzinger, who is based out of our Colombian office, Colombian subsidiary, will provide you with a brief overview of the show and why interzum Bogota is an important industry event. Now, let me introduce you to our guest speaker for today, Mr. Adelbert Ludwig Lazay, who will talk to us about insights and potential opportunities of the wood product industry in Colombia. Mr. Lazay is a seasoned professional in the wood industry, representing the Fedemaderas, which is the National Association of the Wood Industry in Colombia. Currently, he's also consulting at a teak sawmill, Buroteca. But I will turn it over to him. He will provide you a little bit more information about his background in a short moment, along with his presentation. Adelbert, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Kasia. Thank you for the handover. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to all listeners and viewers. As Kasia already mentioned, I will take you to a journey through the forest product industry of Colombia. And I hope you are comfortably seated and ready to listen. As mentioned also already, I can also repeat the recommendation. Just have a sheet of paper and a pencil so you can write down quickly questions or comments. And because we will go straight through the presentation, we will do not interrupt, but we will have a space for questions afterwards, after we finish. And now let's get started. Here we see already our route. We start with an introduction. We'll look at key facts. Then we will analyze the foreign trade situation. We will have a closer look to available woods and also check out how to get actually started with the wood purchase in Colombia. We will get some details about the interzum, the next one in Bogota, and finish with a summary. Here in the background, you can see the skyline of Cartagena. This is a big port city in the northern part of Colombia, and if you get to the point to make business, you will probably have the chance to visit that impressive city. Well, next slide, please. Well, before we dive in, let me just give you some details about me so that you know who's actually talking on the microphone. My name is Adelbert Ludwig Lazay. I'm an engineer for forest products and technology from the University of Hamburg. I'm a German. And nowadays I consider myself as a specialist for planning, operation, and management of sawmill industries. In Germany, I worked in a wood importer and also as a production manager and as oak sawmill. Did consultancies in Latin America since 2014. Due to a practical semester in Colombia during my studies, I had contact here with the industry very early. And in 2017, my wife, which is from Colombia, made me move to Colombia. I started again as a sawmill manager in the pencil manufacturer Faber-Castell. And in 2019, I was then offered the position as a general manager for the Greenfield project Buroteca. Here we built a complete new sawmill. And well, from this I withdrew myself 2 months ago, and now I'm working as a consultant again, also for the same company. And well, so far so good. One can see I like to move around still. And well, now let's dive into the topic of today. Next slide, please. And well, let's get oriented first. First of all, as far as I have seen, we are from pretty much all around the world, from all continents, with a focus of North America. And well, what do we see? Where is Colombia located? On the left side, we see Colombia on the northwestern corner of Latin America, bordering with Panama. And on the right side, we see a map that shows us the topography. This is just important for the moment. We see the Andean mountain chains split up the country into 3 parts. This we need to scan for the moment. We will get back to this later on. I also highlighted the 3 cities. We saw just a moment ago Cartagena, and then Monteria. That's the place where I live right now, where we built the teak sawmill, and Bogota in the heart of Colombia, where the interzum will take place. Next, please. Well, let's get to know some key facts about the sector. Here it is important to know that there is a political stabilization since 1999 going on here in Colombia that actually facilitated the access to forest resources. And nowadays, Colombia has pretty much become a tourist destination. Safety has increased a lot. And well, if we look at the forest resources, we find about 61 million hectares of native or natural forests and 568,000 hectares of plantations. On the right side, we see a diagram that shows us the development, and we can see that the planted area pretty much tripled in the last 2 decades. And well, this is quite a lot. Here I must note, it has slowed down a little bit, the growth, but nevertheless, there is more than 500,000 of planted hectares. And well, the interesting fact here is that in June 2019, already 51% of the plantations were more than 10 years old. And all species are managed with rotation cycles between 10 and 20 years, which means that in the next years, there will be a lot of plantations enter for the first time, the harvest period, which will put a lot of volume on the market. Well, next, please. Yeah, here we see harvest and processing capacity. The annual harvest volume is about 4 million cubic meter. That splits up into 3 million cubic meter from plantations and 1 million cubic meter from natural forests. And the sawmill production is estimated at about 1 million cubic meter. This year it will probably a little bit, yes, due to the COVID-19 situation. And well, this gives us a small picture, or a relatively precise picture of how big the industry is. Some of you, or many of you will probably know there are mills in the US or in Canada or in Germany also that process actually more than 1 million cubic meter just in one sawmill. So in absolute numbers, the sector is relatively small, but if we look back to the forest resources we just saw, we see that the potential is also is enormous. Well, the drying capacity, most larger mills do have modern drying kilns. There has been going on a lot of investment in the last years, but still the domestic market uses a lot of air-dried wood still, so that many companies actually have unused kiln capacity. So if you need dry wood, it shouldn't be a big problem to get it. Well, next, please. Here we see the number of enterprises. The large or the biggest share of enterprises are micro enterprises. However, the larger enterprises here highlighted in red, they contribute with about 95% of the turnover. And what we can see here also is the difference or the share of the companies that actually are dedicated to furniture. And if we look at the 3 categories, we can see it's almost 50%. It's in all cases, it's a little bit of than 50% of the companies are dedicated to furniture industry in some way. And in total, we look on 390 companies potentially relevant to export. Next, please. Talking about export, let's analyze the foreign trade situation. We see here on the right side the diagram that shows us the exports in million US dollars for furniture and wood products. And well, the yellow line shows us the general development. It declined a little bit from 2014 to 2016, sorry, and then increased again. We have in 2019, it was a little bit below 2018. And well, what I did here is I extracted the countries, United States, Mexico, and Canada. And there we have a complete different development. We can see here the blue line, the United States, the exports increased continuously. Also in the case of Mexico, and well, in Canada, Canada hasn't really purchased wood products from Colombia yet. Well, let's see if this can change with the next trade show. Nevertheless, this is interesting. We see here on the left side the codes from the harmonized system, so that you know which product groups are actually behind it. And well, mainly in terms of Incoterms, people use FOB or CNF. And yeah, many smaller companies also sell to bigger companies or traders in the port cities and do not export on their own. Well, now let's see the product groups. Again, here we see in this diagram the export value in percent of the last year. And well, what do we see here? Here we see clearly the share of furniture and parts as the biggest one, is 56%, followed by locks and squares. Key products here are garden, office, and bedroom furniture. And well, interesting about the foreign trade situation is that the imports are actually 3 times bigger than the exports. So we should also look at the imports. Before we do this, let's keep in mind the colors yellow and green, so the engineered wood products and the furniture. And well, let's move to the next slide, please. There we are. And here we see again yellow and green. So the yellow part represent the engineered wood products, and the green is the furniture and parts. So here we see almost 90% of the imports belong to those 2 groups. There is a big market share. There is a big opportunities also to step in. We look here mainly at engineered wood products, furniture parts, for example, chair legs, also CNC machine products, and of course, in the terms of the engineered wood products, the panel industry is a big player. On the right side, we see the biggest import partners in 2019. First came Ecuador, followed by Chile, Brazil, China, Germany, Spain. The United States ranks on 7, and Mexico, I think, is ranking on place 11. And well, if we look here again on the absolute volumes, next slide, please. Then we see here, and then we get to this picture. So first of all, we see the imports are oscillating in the value of 300 million. So it's 3 times more than the export. Maybe you remember the exports were about 100 million US dollars. So there we are, it's 3 times bigger. But well, what I wanted to show here is actually the context, our context now, Canada, Mexico, and the United States. The share is relatively small. And this offers, of course, opportunities. And if we look at the big market that we can see here, and also the fact that more than 60 countries, actually 63 countries, exported wood products to Colombia in 2018, shows that that the market is an interesting market. There are many players on the field. Of course, this generates a competition, but very fine competition. There's also business opportunities. Well, so far to the foreign trade situation. Now let's see actually the wood species, get a little bit more in detail and see the wood species that are being traded. First of all, we see the species from the plantations. We must distinguish clearly between plantation timber and natural forest timbers. In total, there are about 8 main species that dominate the market. Out of those, I would now exclude eucalyptus and pine tree, as these species here in Colombia primarily go to the pulp and paper industry and also panel industry. And of course, these species can be found in many, many other countries as well. What is interesting are these species highlighted here in the red circle, which are oak, ceiba, the rubber tree, melina, teak, and acacia machium. Here we need to know there is a seasonality. We have a rainy season here in Colombia from April to November, which basically reduces the harvest volume because it's more difficult to harvest due to the rain. And but this increases then again in the dry season. So from December to March, the harvest volumes kind of double. And well, these fluctuations also are reflected in the production chain that follows. This is something to have in mind. In total, 3 million cubic meters were harvested in 2019 from the plantations, which equivalates to about 5.4 cubic meters per hectare, or for our North American fellows, this equivalates to about 2,300 board feet, which is in terms of forestry actually a very low value. It can be easily maybe 8 or 10 cubic meter up to, let's say, 5,000 board feet per hectare, still on a sustainable basis. And well, if we remember the age situation, I suspect that this value will increase a lot in the next years. And well, what you can also see on the diagram here is the distribution of the planted area. Teak and acacia machium, there are more than 100,000 hectares, melina 30,000 hectares. So there's a lot of wood out there, and you can see how they compare to each other. Now let's look on the species from the native forest, from the natural forests. There we have a complete different panorama. There we have many, many species. More than 100 species are being traded domestically. The usual lengths are between 7 and 10 feet. There's also longer lengths available, but it's more difficult to get them. And well, there's a big variety of trade names here in Colombia. In general, we have this problem, but here in Colombia, to my mind, there's many more. Here I just put a small list of all those species that are available. For all of you that have already bought timber from Latin America, you probably bought it in Brazil or Peru, maybe in Suriname, and you will probably know Jatoba or the Cumaru. Let's go just quickly through this list. Here you see Jatoba Algorol, Cumaru, it's called Choiba. So this list I organized in a race that we have first the international name or English trade name, and then followed by the Colombian colloquial Spanish trade name. And in parentheses, we have the botanical name and some species I also mentioned if they were or if they are used for furniture. You probably also know Amaranth, Purple Heart, very common. Here I marked Orey or Sajo. This I marked because, not because you know it, but because you probably don't know it. It's not too well known, but it's widely used here in Colombia for structures of furniture. Similar applies to cedar, although this is also used on the surface. There's a lot of chanul, umidi, it's called here, available. Also a lot of balsamo is being exported in Cartagena. There's Cordia wood available, the one that is similar to walnut. There's also Cocobolo, the rosewood. This is the CITES listed species. There's a lot of confusion with the names. I refer here to Divergia retusa. Colombia has excellent balsa qualities, Ochroma pyramidale, especially in the south. And well, we could continue this list probably for quite some time. This should just give you us a small overview. Let's see some pictures on the next slide, please. Here is, no, one back, please. We need to go one slide back, please. We skipped one. Oh yeah, there we are. Thank you. Here on the upper field, we have the plantation species, just some samples. We see here the oak. We just also saw in the diagram. It's Tabebuia rosea. So it's not the oak that some of you may have thought, the quercus. It's Tabebuia rosea. Botanically, it's different. Then we have the teak, nice wood. Then we have ceiba and melina, also nice woods. Both of them are light and bright woods and very easy to work. And here on the bottom, I put some samples of the native species. Here we have the purple heart, Jatoba, and the balsamo, the Santos mahogany, and the kumaru. Important here to note is also that the oak and the ceiba, these species are cultivated in plantations, but they also occur naturally here in Colombia. So they can come from both forest systems. Well, now let's go to the next slide, please. Well, now we get to the point. Now we need to remember what we saw in the beginning. The map we saw in the very beginning was the topography of Colombia. Maybe you remember. Here we see the distribution of the hotspots of timber transformation throughout the country. We see here some blue points. The blue points represent the harvested and transformed volume of wood. The biggest point we can see is representing 100 to 400,000 cubic meters. And well, what we see here is a north-south distribution of the blue points. And also here to Bogota, we have some points. And well, what we now already know, this is the Andean mountain chains. So most of the timber is being moved in the Andean mountain chains. But also here in the Orinoco lowlands, in the eastern part of Colombia, we see a lot of volume. And of course, in the northern part, in the northern lowlands of Colombia, we have a lot of timber being moved, a lot of plantations. Here in the boxes, I put let's say, the dominating species of the region. In Cordoba, Monteria, where I live, we have teak, acacia, melina, and oak. If we go down to the south to Antioquia, I put first the name of the department of the state and then the capital. There we have pine, natives, and teak. Here I must add that most of the natives are actually extracted here in the Pacific rainforest and then traded or transported to the inner parts of the country. There is not too much trade in the south from the Amazon basin. Sorry. Well, then we have here the Cofre region and Cauca and Valle de Cauca, where we have the three big blue points. There we have also located the pulp mill of Colombia that consumes a lot. So here's a lot of eucalyptus, teak, pine, and natives. And in Meta Casanada, which is the Orinoco Basin, there we have additionally the rubber tree species. There's a lot of rubber tree being grown. In Bogota itself, we have a species mix. There's no outstanding species, so because all the species are transported to Bogota. And in the northern departments, we find also teak, melina, pine, and natives. The pine here is the Caribbean pine, so it's not the same pine we find in the Andean mountain chains. It's the introduced species, Caribbean pine. Well, this gives us a little overview about the geographic distribution. Let's move to the next slide, please. Yeah, there we see the topic of legal wood, which comes more and more important when we want to export and import. I put here on the right side, first of all, a comparison. We see here the Corruption Perception Index from Transparency International from 2019. There we see that Colombia ranks on rank 96 and Brazil on 106. I found this very surprising. Even Peru is behind Colombia, and even in the CPI score, Colombia comes here basically in first out of the three countries. So if you have already bought wood from Peru or Brazil, Brazil, the questions on the environment of legality seems to be very similar, at least. And well, the government has developed a certification system which is called Lija Madera Legal. There you find companies that are certified that they provide legal wood. Here on the right corner you see the logo of that timber. Let's move to the next slide, please. We saw that there's this Lazay Act, especially in the United States. The EUTR is the regulation in the European Union. The due diligence requirements that become more and more famous, and importers have to give documentation about the timber they bought. And once you get to the point that you need documentation from Colombia, it's important to know that the public administration distinguishes clearly between plantation timbers and native forest timbers. There's the Ministry of Agriculture, or the executing agency is called ICA for all plantation timbers that can give you the plantation register or the transport permits. And for the native timbers, there is the Ministry of Environment in charge, respectively the CAR, which are the executing agencies that differ from department to department. And there you can get the so-called PMF, the forest management plans, and also transport permits, and well, all kinds of documents you may need to verify the legal origin in your home country. Well, let's move on, please, to the next slide. Now let's get to the question how to get actually started with the wood purchase in Colombia. This is an important question, and yeah, what are the first steps? I recommend, first of all, contact Fedemaderas, which is a national private association of wood industries. I will talk about this later on again. Contact Pro Colombia, which is the governmental organization that favors and supports export and foreign trade. Then, of course, visit the next interzum to get your own picture, or contact independent wood traders or consultants. And well, once you have contact with the producer, once you have found the company that may produce the product you want, then I have here some recommendations that may help you to make sure that you are on the successful side of the business. First of all, maintain communication. If you speak some Spanish, this will help a lot. Make sure there is personal contact and mill visits, very important. And also be prepared that the producer may ask for a percentage advance payment. 20–30% are very common. Next slide, please. Product development is a big topic, very important. Help the producer to optimize the production and lower the costs, and of course enhance the product quality. And this is done via the mill visit. When you go there, have someone explain you the process, the production process in detail. This is very important. It is very likely if you do that, you will find processes that are completely exaggerated on the one hand, and some processes that are deficient. And you can write an email and explain what you want, but it probably will not have the same result as if you go there and really talk to the people on the ground. Keep an additional time buffer regarding the agreed delivery date. Time management is just different here in Latin America. Start to buy realistic amounts according to your mill visit. Do not buy 100% of the mill's capacity in the beginning. This probably will not work. Also important, agree on a product inspection in the mill shortly before shipment. This is very helpful, and make sure only the products you want actually to buy and you have paid for arrive in your destination port in Houston or in Hamburg or wherever. Very, very important process. Of course, it is an extra cost in the beginning, but to my mind, in the beginning, it's worthwhile. And the most important point of the negotiation, the price. Negotiate the price on a healthy basis. There is a tendency to say yes on the producer side. People want to make business, and especially now in Corona times, economy is slow. This tendency may even increase. And well, what is a healthy basis? To my mind, a healthy basis is reflected in margins between 15 and 30%. If you push too much, let's say more than 50% margin, it may happen that you get a call in the middle of the production process and the guy tells you, hey, man, I can't cover the costs. And then you have to renegotiate and adjust again. And this usually only causes confusion. Oh, this is very important. Here we see Fedemaderas again. Just some facts. It's the biggest national private association of wood processing industries in Colombia. It has about 500 direct member companies in 22 departments. You see here on the right side a map that shows the presence of the association throughout the country. They have a nice weekly newsletter that informs about all events and ongoings on the market. Here are the contact details, and they are probably able to contact directly you directly with the company that may produce the product you're looking for. And well, let's get to the next slide, please. Yeah, there we coming to an end already. Now let's have an outlook and summarize. I hope, first of all, you now know more about the Colombian forest products industry than before. I think we have seen that Colombia has a young and dynamic forest product industry that also should recover soon from the COVID lockdown. There will be large quantities of plantation timber available in the next years. There are business opportunities in both directions, in export of, for example, engineered wood products and also import of raw material from your point of view. And well, the invitation remains: discover the timber sector on your own and visit the interzum in next February in Bogota. I will definitely be there, very likely together with an exhibitor. And well, it would be great to talk to you, maybe to some of you, and share some information and see what we can do. I will now hand over to my colleague Kasia Misha, and she will give you some more details about the interzum. Thank you.
Thank you, Adelbert. So yes, the presentation isn't over yet. Next, we will tell you a little bit more about interzum Bogota. The next edition is scheduled for February 2nd through the 5th of 2021. And we will start off by showing you a brief video, and then I'll turn things over actually to my colleague Lena, who is based in our subsidiary office in Colombia, in Bogota. Let's get started.
Hi everyone. Hi Kasia. Well, hi everyone. Good morning to our listeners in the Americas, and good evening to those in Europe and Asia. Thank you all for joining us today on this webinar. I'm very happy about the opportunity of a direct communication with you as customers who will actively take part in shaping this trade show, interzum Bogota. Thank you, Mr. Lazay, for giving us this perfect insight into the Colombian industry of wood and woodworking. My name is Lena Pletzinger. I'm speaking to you from our Colombian subsidiary in Colombia. And in subsequent of what we've just learned from Mr. Lazay, I can state that Interzum Bogota is a perfect platform to enter the Colombian market, because there is where you will meet the principal actors of the industry. Let's move on, please, to the next slide. Okay, on this picture, you can see Bogota, the capital of Colombia and one of the most important metropolitan cities in Latin America. Colombia has been experiencing a growing construction industry for years, which obviously benefits the wood and furniture market. The trade show Interzum Bogota will take place in Corferias, the International Business and Exhibition Center of Bogota, which is located less than 4 kilometers from the city center and basically between the center and the international airport. Thanks for switching to the next slide. Here, this is an image of the venue, looking at it from the entrance arco. Corferias is not only the exhibition center of Interzum Bogota, but it's also the alliance of Kölnmesse, and together Kölnmesse and Corferias are the organizers of the show. On the next slide, we will see the floor plan of Interzum Bogota. Hall 11 and 223, which are highlighted in red, have been traditionally the halls of the show. For this time, we have added Hall 3 and 4 to the exhibition area. In terms of product segmentation, as shown underneath their hall plan, Interzum Bogota is aligned to its mother show Interzum Cologne in Germany, regarding the traditional sectors of the furniture production. This includes function and components, materials and nature, and textile and machinery, covering Hall 11 to 17 and 3 and 4. The special case of Interzum Bogota towards Interzum Cologne is that this show also covers the previous stages in the production chain of furniture manufacturing. Hereby, I'm referring to the woodworking and wood processing sector, which is represented by the segments machinery for furniture production, tools and equipment, and forestry technology. Exhibiting in halls 18 to 23 and Hall 3. For the first time, we have a tool pavilion powered by the International Hardware Fair Cologne for all tool specialists in Hall 18, and a special area for companies from the upholstery industry in Hall 4. Now that you're familiar with the hall distribution, I would like to present to you on the next slide a quick overview of the key elements of the show. Although this edition of Interzum Bogota in 2021 is the first edition ever under this name, the trade show itself has been well established for 28 years under the early name of Feria Mueble Madera, a translation of wood and furniture show. On this slide, you can see some numbers of their last edition in 2018, with almost 200 exhibitors, of which approximately 50% came from outside of Colombia. The show is one of the most international shows in Corferias. Furthermore, we welcomed more than 13,000 visitors out of 34 different countries. The neighbor countries like Venezuela, Ecuador, and Peru, but also Central America, the US, and Spain were the most represented countries on the visitor side. Speaking of visitors at a glance, the show was mainly attended by furniture manufacturers, forest engineers, wood processors, construction workers, architects, and more listed here on this slide. Last but not least, I would like to show you on the next slide what can be expected at Interzum Bogota 2021 besides the exhibition space. We will offer B2B meetings in a special matchmaking area. There will be a speaker's corner, which is the opportunity for all exhibitors to present their products in a separate conference room. And we are organizing a congress and lectures on every day of the show. For the first time, we will have the Piazza, a special area and key feature of Interzum, which presents the products and innovations, new products and innovations organized and selected by the Chamber of Architects in Colombia. Well, this was a quick overview of interzum Bogota. I've reached to the end of this little presentation, and I would like to thank you all for your attention. Please feel free to pose your comments or questions. And I'm very looking forward to meeting you all in person at interzum Bogota 2021.
Thank you so much, Lena. Now this is a perfect time to address any questions you may have. Please feel free to, we did receive a few. If you have more, please type them into our chat room or the Q&A feature of our presentation. And I will go ahead and start with the ones that we received so far. First question is asking, why was interzum Bogota rescheduled first to November of this year and then to February? Is this the best possible solution? Why is this a good time to be in Bogota?
Okay, well, due to the pandemic, we had to change the date of interzum Bogota from May to another date in the future. The change of date to February 21 was well chosen and thought through after a first intent to be able to organize it in this year. But since it wasn't able to organize any trade show at the venue called Ferias, due to our temporary hospital, which is right now scheduled or set up at Coferias, we had to move it to the next year. We think it's a very good date, the February date in 2021, because it's also 1 year before we will organizing the trade show for 2022. So it's more than a year in advance to the next edition. Maybe this question is probably also referring to the close date to interzum in Germany, and we are aware that the show is only 3 months before the mother show, and we know that there are some companies exhibiting at both shows. But I would like to stress here that both shows have their own different focus on different target groups. It's visitors. Well, while interzum Bogota is focused on visitors from the Americans, interzum in Germany is addressed to customers from the European countries. Therefore, we would like to encourage you all to not miss the opportunity to present your products to both markets. Well, that's I think that's my answer on the date.
Great, thank you, Lena. Now, Mr. Lazay, I have a couple of a comment and a question for you. First one is from Mr. Hank Marshall.
I think I got it. I had the time now to scroll through the chat, right? And I already saw it. And of course, very interesting. First of all, he's questioning or commenting the taxonomy of Ipe and oak, of Ipe and oak, two hardwood species. Thank you very much, first of all. And the Tabebuia rosea, which I declared as the oak, is the oak. The Ipe is the Tabebuia ceratifolia, which is another Tabebuia. There are actually many Tabebuia, and well, the oak, as I mentioned, is called oak because I think it's because it looks like oak, but botanically it's Tabebuia rosea, and the European oak is, as we know, the Quercus, as you also mentioned. There's Quercus petrea, Quercus rubra. Well, I don't want to dive too much into botanical taxonomy, but yeah, to make clear, the Ipe is right, is Tabebuia, but not rosea, but another one. In this case, ceratifolia, and the oak is the Tabebuia, the Colombian oak, and the European or American is the Quercus. And well, of course, the CPI, the Corruption Perception Index from Transparency International, of course, it is a general index. It's not related to forestry. That's totally right. Nevertheless, it gives us, let's say, at least an idea of how corrupt a country may be, right? It's always a perception. It's not, there's no evidence. And I think if there's a country classified as very corrupt or as not corrupt by Transparency International, this tendency is also reflected in the forestry sector. Of course, it's not exactly the forestry sector, but one can assume that the forestry sector is also is in a similar way perceived than the sector in general, or the economy or the country in general. But it's right, it's not forestry specifically related. It's a general perception of legality, yeah, legality enforcement. And I think these were the points I could see. As the moment, there is another question of Mr. Fernando. He wants to know about the company. Yeah, as mentioned, I don't want to mention precise companies right now in this context. This is not the space to do it here. But first of all, I can recommend you to contact Fedemaderas or Pro Colombia. They will definitely help. Or you can write me an email as well. And well, what else is there in questions? Is there any more?
Yes, there's one question, another question from Mr. Marshall.
Okay.
Just reading it as we get it.
Ah, yeah. Okay, maybe Mrs. Misha, you can read it out so everybody can.
I was trying to suggest it. Thank you. So the question is, going back to the original comment or question that Mr. Lazay was answering, the reason I brought up, or that Mr. Marshall is saying, the reason I brought up that this is shorter length, it's often correlated with illegal logging, since large professional operations use heavy equipment to haul out large logs, while informal sector lacks big equipment, so they bring out small logs cut in sections. Can you address the correlation between short lengths and illegal logging in Colombia?
Oh, very good question. And I must say, no, I cannot, because this is a question, well, who is able to answer this question? Probably nobody. I will not, yeah, I cannot say that there is a correlation. This is something which is not measurable. There probably is, there might be, of course, and it is in fact the case that longer lengths, of course, require big machinery, and shorter lengths don't. And a big share of the harvested volume in Colombia is indeed extracted manually or with animals. That's right. And obviously, this technique results that larger lengths cannot be hauled, right? And only shorter lengths up to 7 to 10 feet can be pulled out of the forest in the traditional, let's say, harvest scheme. But I cannot say really if there's a strong correlation. If there don't, I agree that there might be, but I'm not able, and probably nobody's really able to say yes or no to this question. This is a question, a good question, and yeah, it offers a lot of room for discussion, actually. Yeah.
Great. We have another comment from Mr. Omar Valderrama. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, who is the sales manager of Proquinal, which is a paint company in Bogota. It seems like this company has been exhibiting at Feria Mueble Madera since 2006. And he's saying that the show is the most important event in the Andean region. Thank you so much, Omar, for the positive comment. We appreciate it.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions that you would like to address, either to Mr. Lazay or us as the team, related to the upcoming interzum Bogota?
There is one that came in through the question and answer. Do you see that box there? Or do you want me to read it?
Please, thank you.
Anna had asked, are you seeing any important changes on the construction or trade industries in Colombia as a result of the COVID crisis?
Can you repeat this, please?
So I'm not sure who might be best to answer this question. It says, are we seeing or are you seeing any important changes on the construction or trade industries in Colombia as a result to the COVID crisis? So whether maybe wood products within construction and in the general trade industry in general is how I would personally interpret it.
That's also a very interesting question. I have asked myself this already, also together with some colleagues in the last weeks. And well, first of all, we are still in the middle of the COVID corona crisis still, right? I mean, we haven't passed it yet. This makes it also a little bit difficult to anticipate already. Well, I don't think it will bring us structural changes in terms of products. It will now affect especially the volumes that are being moved. And but the crisis itself, the pandemic, has an input on the products and product groups that are traded. I would believe no, because finally the client, the needs of the people determine this. Nevertheless, I can also only say time will tell. We still have to surpass the corona crisis, especially in Colombia. There is still the lockdown going on. And we are still in a very early stage. And actually, I hope also not. I hope not.
I have a comment on this question too. Thanks for bringing it up. What I can say about the construction industry or the current crisis is that the government of Colombia is trying to reactivate certain economies again. So there's still a lockdown. But the construction industry, for example, was one of the first that the government had activated already. So this sector is not standing still at the moment. It's already actively working. So I think in this regard, we are lucky that the construction industry was not paused for such a long time. And speaking about the COVID crisis, I understand and I expected questions about their influence or the impact on our trade show. And I think, like due to recent information of the government, the international flights will probably be operating again from September onwards. And we can see that Colombia or Latin America, in terms of the crisis, was a couple of months ahead of the European and Asian countries. So what we can now see in Europe and Asia, the activation of a lot of industry sectors, we will probably see in a couple of months in Latin America. So right now, yes, we have a big crisis in Latin America, but I think we can predict somehow that in a couple of months also these countries will follow the model of activation of industry, such as in the European Asian countries. So I think we can have like an image in our mind where we will heading to in a couple of months. And also referring again to the first question about the date of February 22, I think it's a very good date in order to give, first of all, the time for the companies to activate their own business, to plan and reorganize their budget and their business plans. So from now on, it's 8 months from now, and I think it's a good time. It's for activation of businesses. And talking about Colombia, I think that once the government allows the activation of businesses again, and as I told you before, that probably from September onwards, but of course this is subject to modification. But once the government allows the activation of businesses, we expect a quick recovery and refreshment of the economy of the country. I think everybody's waiting to reactivate all their businesses again. So I think we can assume that in a couple of months, Colombia will be able to start again. And that's also a comment that I wanted to make on the new date and the Corona crisis.
Exactly. Thank you. I just also want to add something. As we initiated with the question, if there are structural changes in the products and market of the timber industry due to the Corona, well, this we have answered already. Nevertheless, I do see a general tendency. There is more and more engineered wood products on the market, and I think this is a tendency, a trend that will continue a lot. So the traditional completely solid wood product will, let's say, lose territory, and the engineered wood products, they gain territory. And in our context, I think also in both directions, import and export. This is something, I mean, in the 80s, in earlier stages, countries like Colombia or Brazil were only exporting logs, and now also engineered wood products are being exported, and I think this share will also grow.
And
general outlook.
Yes, and as we saw in your presentation, Adelbert, Colombia is is also a country of import and export, and so the sector depends on the general global development on the coronavirus crisis. So this is all, we can't only comment on how Colombia will change. It all depends on the global development of the crisis.
Great, Lena, we have one more question related to the show, and then a few more questions for Mr. Lazay. In terms of interzum Bogota, the question came in about the exhibitor count. How many international exhibitors are we expecting?
Okay. Well, I can say that a very realistic picture in terms of exhibitors at interzum Bogota we'll probably see from September on. But what I can say until now, that we have reached the highest international exhibitor registration ever. So we have already more than 200 exhibitors registered, including country delegations who bring smaller companies. So we have around 200 international companies, plus around 100 companies from Colombia. And this growing number was the reason also why we edited the whole 3 and 4 to the whole plan picture. And yes, of course, due to the crisis, of course, some exhibitors were worried at first about the realization of the show. But since we now moved the date, we see a growing interest in the show, and we are very optimistic for the realization.
Great, thank you. Now, Mr. Lazay, a few questions from Fernando, who previously asked a question. Is clean dry thick boards 3.5 to 4 inches available in Colombia, oak or teak? Is it commercially reasonable to dry this wood thickness? And
well, good question, very good question, and already almost answered with the second sentence. In terms of his question, if it's reasonable, it's well, it's very difficult, and most people will probably know it. You can kiln dry up to 2 inches, and this is already very thick. Kiln dry 3 or 4 inches thick is usually not being done. This we would require probably a vacuum dryer, which most mills do not have. Most mills have a normal air drying kilns. And so what you get is, I would say, up to 2 inches thickness. 3 inches, it's usually not kiln dry, and 4 inches even less, because it's very difficult, especially in the teak wood. It's even more difficult because you have the pith in the center of the tree, which tends to crack if you dry it at this thicknesses. So there's a technical problem also. As we look at plantation timber, of course, the diameters are not as big as the native teak that you find in Asia, which means you would have to include the pith in the drying process, but this would probably cause cracks in this thicknesses. And as I said, usually you up to 2 inches you can dry with a conventional dryer, and for oak applies it in a similar way. It's just too thick. I mean, even in Europe or in the States, what you dry is usually 2 inch thick, maybe a little bit more, but 4 inches. This would require maybe with a vacuum dryer, but no, usually you don't dry this.
Next, we have more of a comment from Mr. Harold Westrick, who is saying wood in length from 7 to 10 feet doesn't have to be non-legal. Some terrain is just too difficult to access with heavy machinery, so they use horses, oxes, etc. I buy it legally this way in different Latin American countries.
Great. Well, this is kind of a comment, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the point. The extraction takes place still in many parts with animals, and it's a good comment.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for great questions, comments. We really appreciate it. Now, if we can go back one slide back, we skipped it. Okay, this is our contact information for our team at our Chicago subsidiary in North America. Myself and my colleague, mostly related to exhibiting related questions, and my colleague Leslie Fleck, who's the visitor manager of VIP accounts. So if we have any listeners who are interested in visiting interzum Bogota, we'd love to hear from you. We will try to assist you in any way we can. And of course, my colleague Lena Platzinger, who's based in Bogota. Thank you so much for being with us today. And we hope to see you all in Bogota, February 2nd through the 5th of 2021.